Anyone remember the McCarrick report? If you don't worry, you're not alone. It appears that Rome has forgotten about it as well, but the short version is this. The authorities in the Roman Curia promised to release a report on McCarrick and all that subject entails. They said they would do this in the name of honesty and fixing problems and making sure that this situation would be but an anomaly in church history. The report was promised for June of this year. Now it's mid-September, and well, still nothing. So let's get into this subject because I know that I'm not alone in wondering what's going on. I'll borrow extensively here from a piece written by Stephen White on the 6th of August for The Catholic Thing, and I'm choosing this specifically because of when it was released, but also because White correctly illustrates at least partially what is at stake. But he leaves something out, and I'll go over that at the end. This is a lengthy quote, but please bear with me. It's worth the time. Quoting the article from early August. New York's Cardinal Dolan held an online video conference for clergy on Tuesday and said that his sources tell him that the McCarrick report will be out later this month. He said he does not know what's in it. The latter seems believable. The former remains to be seen. It has been 2 years since the Vatican announced it would be conducting and preparing a report on the case of Theodore McCarrick. Cardinal Parolin said of the report's release, quote, "The publication depends on the Pope. The work that is done, but the Pope must give the final word. I think that it will come out soon. I cannot tell you exactly when." That was in early February. The second anniversary of McCarrick's resignation from the College of Cardinals has come and gone. Since then, the Bishops' Conference has twice voted against publicly petitioning Pope Francis to release the report promptly and in full. To almost everyone, including many bishops, individually, if not corporately, the release of the McCarrick report is an obvious and necessary step in establishing honesty. Ideally, such honesty would lead to accountability. Giving account to the faithful for the trust that has been taken from them ought to be seen as a matter of justice. More than that, the release of the McCarrick report is a necessary step toward the kind of reconciliation our church, so marred and divided, badly needs. If our shepherds hope to regain the trust that has been squandered, then our shepherds must be willing to name the failings for which they would seek forgiveness. The hierarchy's calls for healing and forgiveness ring hollow so long as it conceals from its members the full extent of what our leaders did and failed to do. End lengthy quote. There's more in that piece if you want to read it. I quoted this from the reposting of the article to the Ethics and Public Policy Center website. A link to that is on the Sources blog, as is usual. The Sources blog can be found at returntotradition.org, and I highly recommend you follow me there, because a lot of people are now not getting the notifications that they asked YouTube to give them. So please follow me over at returntotradition.org or on the Facebook page by the same name. I do recommend you read the article. It's for yourself. What White is missing here is a rather basic question of how far did McCarrick's reach extend. We know the story, and I don't feel like telling it yet again. If you want, I've got plenty of videos on this. I've covered this extensively over the past 2 years. In fact, the McCarrick story is really what helped launch what I do here. No one knows where he is, save for some high-ranking prelates, and that should concern everyone. My question stands. We want to know how far his operations and connections went. We know he was instrumental in the deal that Cardinal Zen spends his time trying to raise awareness of. And we know McCarrick had extensive connections to the machine of the Sovereign of the United States, regardless of which affiliation. His reach was extensive. We don't know just how. We've received hints from James Grine about the extent of some of it, and he would have an idea. He was the one who linked him directly to the St. Gallen group, based out of St. Gallen, Switzerland, which just happens to be a major hub of the stonecutters. I'm sure that's not related to this at all, right? Nothing to see here, folks. McCarrick is tied directly to what the church is experiencing today. As I mentioned in my podcast episode on Vigano, Standing with Father Altman, McCarrick was a major player in the Land O'Lakes statement and debate. If you haven't seen those, and you probably haven't, check out those episodes from earlier in the week. His influence in the Catholic university system is extensive, and the result of his work is readily apparent in the condition of that system. Directly connected to that issue was the account of Mr. Grine, who stated in his interview with Taylor Marshall and elsewhere that McCarrick frequently traveled and met with important persons around the world, and he greased the wheels with them, if you catch my drift. It shouldn't be surprising that he was directly connected to the development of major not-for-profit funds in the U.S. that reach out to wealthy Catholics and asks them to donate directly to support the work of the papacy. And there's nothing wrong with that, per se. Remember the traditional rosary intentions of the Pope, regardless who the Pope is. There are 6 of them, but they basically get boiled down to different variations of the missionary work of the Church. And the fund he helped found in America was advertised as being used to fund the work of the papacy, which in the modern world has added to it the corporal works of mercy in addition to the missionary work of the Church. This was funded by asking wealthy Catholics, again, often at their most vulnerable times, after, a personal loss of some kind, to support the work of the papacy directly. And again, that's perfectly laudable. And McCarrick was extremely successful at this, and this gained him a lot of influence in the hierarchy, although he already had a lot of influence. That fund was only established in the 1980s, and he had been in the priesthood since the 1950s. But now think about this. It also gained him influence with the sovereign. The connections he developed here created a wide web of influence. And how far did that extend? We want to know about the finer technical and canonical details of what brought him down, to be sure, but we need to know the extent that his influence remains in the hierarchy and in the broader world, and how that influence of the world influenced the Church. Again, look at the work of Cardinal Joseph Zen, and you'll see what I mean. McCarrick is directly responsible for that whole situation. He doesn't bear all responsibility, to be sure, but he was instrumental in that deal being made. In fact, he was the one who crafted it. We can only hope and pray that the McCarrick report will go into these critical details. But let's be real for a second. It probably won't, because the St. Gallen group is highly influential in the Roman Curia. Look at the men that Francis surrounds himself with, and look at who gets promoted within the hierarchy around the world, and you'll see it pretty clearly. And maybe that's why the report hasn't been released yet. Like I said at the beginning, we were promised this report by the Vatican by June of this year, and they made that promise in February. It was supposed to come out 3 months ago, and it was promised 7 months ago, and still nothing. Zilch, zip. What we have gotten is a word of a papal encyclical and a companion book for popular consumption. And by themselves, there's nothing wrong with that either, but wouldn't you know it, no mention from Rome about the report that has been promised on the man that caused so many problems for the Church, to put it very, very mildly. And that article that I cited for you was saying it was likely going to be coming from by the end of August, and it was coming from Cardinal Dolan, who should have a better idea than the rest of us. So it tells us that many of us are left in the dark, including our shepherds themselves. So what do you think about this? Are we wasting our time pondering where this is? I mean, after all, we never got a response to the dubia. According to Frake Walker's count over at Canon 212, the day this podcast is released will be day 1,459 since the dubia was submitted. Not that there ever was a promise of a response from Francis to the dubia, just an assumption that there would be, because in times past such requests have always been responded to by the Roman Pontiff. But let me know your ideas on this, and please pray for the Church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.